Hey guys, welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe. Thanks for tuning in to Rosenfield 10, where I cover the Saints. Consider me your friend or your coworker who loves the Saints as much as you do. And when you see me, you say, "Hey Joe, what you think so far?" That's what these videos are for. You leave your comment, let me know what you think. Today, we are going to talk about the OTAs from last week, kind of like a wrap up of what happened, and we'll look at the roster and we'll talk about it. All right, so the reporters were allowed access to the OTAs last week on Thursday. They came back with their reporting. The best days for me to do videos are Tuesdays or Thursdays. So this is my video wrapping up last week's results, and we'll look at the roster and we'll talk about it. Here's the offense. All right, at quarterback, Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler battling it out. They both had 8 pass attempts and 7-on-7 drills, and we heard Rattler went 8 for 8, and he looked decisive, and he was taking 3 steps and throwing the ball. Well, yeah, there was no rush. This wasn't a game situation. My issue with Rattler last year was his indecisiveness. He was too slow reading the defense, too slow getting rid of the ball. He took too many sacks. So it's nice to know that Rattler's getting rid of the ball in voluntary OTAs against air or against 7 players, no rush. So, yeah, we're all excited about Rattler right now. Maybe he could be the starting quarterback. Well, I'm going to have to see this in preseason, in actual game situations before I'm sold. Shuck, I expect him to struggle because he's a rookie. And even though Shuck was 6 of 8 or 7 of 8 and looked pretty good, it's kind of like a getting used to the league kind of thing. That's the way I look at it. So I can't say after last week's OTAs, Rattler going 8 for 8 and looking decisive, that all of a sudden he's the front runner. We're not going to know until probably till preseason who's our starting quarterback's going to be. But Rattler and Shuck have good ability, and we'll see what happens. I'm not going to get too excited about anything that comes out of these OTAs, honestly. It's interesting to talk about, but it's not something that I'm going to do videos on every day. My favorite Saints content providers are boring me to death with their videos right now because they're talking about every little nuance of everything, and just none of it to me is very important. Jake Hayner hurt himself, a oblique injury. He's probably not going to be available until training camp. So there's that. Yeah, and Hunter Deckers was there at OTAs, not much reporting going on there. So basically at quarterback, we're trying to figure out who our starter is. Not going to happen till preseason, and yeah, Hayner's not going to be a part of the mix, I don't think. He's going to be missing all of this time. Eventually, when Hayner does practice in training camp, I'm sure he's going to look good. He's a smart guy. He always looks good in practice. Then he gets out there in preseason. He doesn't look very good at all. But Deckers is going to have to do something spectacular, probably in training camp or in preseason games, to beat Hayner out. But we'll see. That's one of them things we'll keep an eye on. I'm sure the Saints will have either 2 or 3 quarterbacks on the final roster, but we'll carry these 4 the whole time. And we bring in another quarterback. I'm not quite sure what that's going to say. Some people think we need a veteran. Yeah, right now it's between Shuck and Rattler for the starter, and the clipboard holder and the bench warmer is going to be either Hayner or Deckers. So to be determined. At running back, Alvin Kamara wasn't present at OTAs this past week. I don't know if Clyde Edwards-Helaire was or not, but at running back, the biggest thing coming out is Kendre Miller and Devin Neal and Marcus Yarns were the guys that I heard about getting a lot of the reps. That was kind of the pecking order. Miller, Neal, and Yarns. So maybe Yarns has a leg up on Jones and Valladay right now. I think when Kamara and Edwards Helaire show up, it's going to be a boost to this room. Kendre Miller is a fine player. He just needs to learn the offense. This will be his third offense in as many years. So I don't know if Miller's going to have it all put together in time for the season to start. As far as physical ability, running the ball, he looks great, breaks tackles, gets yards after contact, a big guy. Yeah, we all want Kendre Miller to work out. He has to stay healthy, and he can't seem to do that. When he is healthy, he's going to have to learn the playbook. He's going to have to learn where to line up. He's going to have to be able to pick up his blocking assignments and everything else. So that's all I can say about running back right now. Miller, Neal, and Yarns were the guys getting most of the reps. Not sure who's going to show up for OTAs this week. That is still to be determined. At wide receiver, Chris Olave looked great. He was at OTAs. Rashid Shaheed looks fully recovered from his surgery. Looks fast as ever, and he looked good. He was at OTAs. Brandon Cooks was at OTAs. Looked like a solid veteran, doing everything right. Cedric Wilson was a guy that was at OTAs and looked pretty good. I think Kellen Moore has a plan for Cedric Wilson. Donovan Peoples-Jones looked pretty good as well. And I'll also mention that Dante Pettis was higher on the pecking order in OTAs above Bub Means and Mason Tipton and Moochie Dixon and Chris Tyree. So right now, your top six look to be Olave, Rashid, Cooks, Wilson, Peoples-Jones, and Dante Pettis. I'm expecting Kevin Austin Jr. to get some action here soon. But other than that, it's nice to have all of these starters back on the field. Everybody complained about Spencer Rattler's time as a starter last year because of all of the backups he had to play with. Well, Derek Carr had to play with those backups too. Any quarterback would have had to play with those backups. You go out there and you do what you can with what you have. So, yeah, having Olave, Rashid, and now Cooks, yeah, the quarterback should look a lot better because that wide receiving core is a lot better than what we were going out there with for half the year last year. Overall, it's not a very strong room, but if you can get some action out of Peoples Jones or out of Pettis or out of Means to go along with Wilson, then you never know. It might be all right. Cooksey says he doesn't. We don't need a big guy. They can get open. Contested catches are overrated. Usually, what Cook says is, if you're making contested catches, it's because you didn't get separation. That's how Cooks looks at it. Olave, Rashid, and Cooks can get separation. So that's where we're at on wide receiver. At tight end, Juwan Johnson was there. Foster Moreau was there, but he's not participating, even though he was helping out and he's walking around just fine. Morrow's recovering from an injury. We have no idea what's going on with Taysom Hill. And Dallin Holker was also not available at OTAs last week. So after Juwan Johnson and Jack Stoll, you're trying to figure out, do we have tight ends at all? I mean, our rookie, Mataval, is probably going to struggle. I remember last year, Michael Jacobson and Dallin Holker were pretty much neck and neck. And then eventually Holker took over as that last tight end and ended up making a roster spot. Jacobson ended up on the practice squad. So I think Jacobson has some talent. He was probably ahead of Holker going in at the beginning of everything last year. And then, you know, Holker ends up standing out toward the end. So I don't have too much of an issue. I'm worried a little about what it's all going to look like on day one of the regular season because of the injuries. We need Morrow to come back. We need Hill to come back. We need Holker to get involved. But if we're excited about Matavao as a rookie, then you should be excited about Jacobson as well because he'll probably be ahead of Matavao, you know, being he's been in the league a couple of years now, Jacobson. So, and then Welch is another guy competing. So tight end's a big question mark. The offensive line, well, the reporters got to go on Thursday, and what they saw was Kelvin Banks Jr. at left tackle, Trevor Penning at left guard, and Taliese Fuanga at right tackle. That's what they saw on Thursday. Not sure how everyone was lined up all the other days of OTAs that the reporters weren't allowed to see, but that's one I'm going with right now. Looking at Kelvin Banks Jr. with Landon Young as the primary backup at both tackle spots. Landon Young can play guard as well. We're going to have Trevor Penning at left guard, and he's going to have to outplay Reduns. Reduns also has tackle abilities. So Nick Saldivari is going to try to make a spot on this roster as a guard center type. We've got that Will Clapp now, who's got starting experience at guard and center. So I think Saldivari's got to beat out Clapp for a backup role here. I think Reduns and Young are going to make this team easily. And I think Clapp's going to make this team. I think it's up to Saldivari to beat out somebody else like Porcelli Simpkins at right guard. Simpkins is a big player, and we know Kellen Moore likes his offensive linemen big. Simpkins can play multiple positions. If he can show that he can play both sides of the line at guard, he might be worth keeping over Saldivari. That's one to look out for. I also really like Kyle Hergo. I don't think he's a really big guy, so if Kellen Moore is really leaning towards those big guys, maybe Hergo's an odd man out. But I expect to see Hergo in preseason. I expect to see him play pretty well. And these other backup tackles, Ezrium, Kilty, and Ball, not quite sure they really have a shot at all. Because if you look at Banks and Fuanga as your starter, Landon Young as your swing tackle major backup, Reduns has tackle ability, and you got to remember Trevor Penning's a tackle too. So I think that's where that's where your tackles are at. Banks, Fuanga, Young, Reduns, and Penning. And we're just going to have to find someone. If something happens at right tackle, Fuanga has to miss a few games. Does Landon Young start at right tackle, or do you swing Penning out to right tackle and start Reduns? Or does Reduns play right tackle? We still got a lot of different pieces to figure out through the OTAs, through the training camp. But when it's all said and done, I think your main tackles will actually be Banks, Fuanga, Young, Penning, and Reduns. And then your guards and your center. There's a lot of different pieces there. Ruiz has played at center before too, and I know Hergel can play guard and center. They want Saldivari to be a backup center, and he plays guard. So Saldivari was getting a lot of work at right guard for the OTAs. So as it is right now, this is how I've got the starting five, and this is all a work in progress. That is your offense. Let's take a look at the defense. All right, I've got Cam Jordan listed at defensive end. At the OTAs, there were reports that he was playing both end and on the edge, outside linebacker, standing up and rushing the passer. I think Jordan's got a better chance of adding sacks to his career total if he stands up and rushes the passer from that outside linebacker slash edge rusher position. I have him listed here at defensive end. I think he's a better run stopper. I know he's a better run stopper than Brian Brissett. But the reports out of OTAs are as follows. Gottschall wasn't there. Nathan Shepard wasn't there. So your starting nose tackle on this past Thursday was Colin Saunders. And I think Christian Boyd was playing a lot when Saunders wasn't at the nose tackle spot. Vernon Broughton was starting at defensive end alongside Brian Brissy on the other side. Brian Brissy was the starting defensive end, and Jordan was standing up. Now, that's the reports we were hearing. I still think Brissy is a liability against the run. If he improves and his coaching staff can get the best out of him, yeah, that's Brissy's best spot, defensive end in a 3-4. That's his spot. I don't think Brissy's going to be standing up anytime soon, but I still have Jordan here at defensive end, starting defensive end, and just keep that in mind. All of these guys in the front three are should be flexible enough to play either position. When it's all said and done and Nathan Shepard shows back up, I think his best natural position will be that defensive end spot. I think Vernon Broughton is going to be a guy that plays some nose tackle and plays defensive end. And, if we go to an even front, he can play all along the line. So a guy to look out for is Anderson. I think he's got a chance to make the team. I think it's a long shot for Thomas to make the team. And we didn't hear a lot from the reporting about Ridgeway. I think he's a guy that can fit all along the line as well. Ridgeway is listed as a defensive tackle, nose tackle type here. So your starters for the OTAs were Saunders in the middle, Brissy and Broughton on the side. And in the stand-up rushers, Chase Young wasn't there. Carl Granderson was on one end, and Cam Jordan was on the other side. I think Jonas Williams is a guy that got a lot of playing time on the outside at OTAs, so we have to consider Williams. We all want to see Fidel Diggs do good. Jasheen Davis was getting involved. Powell is a true linebacker, so that's a nice spot for him. And Chris Rumpf used to play with some of the coaching staff before. So outside linebackers, still a work in progress. It'd be nice to see Chase Young out there doing this kind of role. I mean, this is what we're expecting him to do, and I'd like to see him show up for these OTAs and prove that he can do it. Because right now it's kind of Jordan and Williams and Granderson and Diggs. Davis got some work as well. In the middle, Demario Davis wasn't available. He wasn't there for OTAs. And the starting two were Werner and Stutzman, and then Werner and Nephi Sewell. And Sewell got a lot of playing time next to Werner in the middle. We all want to see Stutzman, and we all know that he's going to be part of this team. Stutzman looked fine. Sewell looked fine. Jalen Ford is a guy that's from Texas. We have a lot of Texas coaches on our team now, so I expect Jalen Ford to get a shot. And yeah, that's kind of like how the middle of the defense at linebacker looked. It was Werner and Sewell and Werner and Stutzman. So interesting to see when Davis comes back how the pecking order is going to end up. If your primary number three middle linebacker is going to be either Sewell or Stutzman. I really like Nephi Sewell. I really like Stutzman as a rookie. So a lot of youth there at linebacker in the middle, and I'm going to be excited about it. Secondary. Alontae Taylor looks like they want him to be the star. Taylor was on the field all the time. They didn't have a lot of base. When they did do base, Taylor was on the outside, but when they had multiple DBs, Taylor was floating around, and he was playing a lot in the middle, kind of like a nickel slash safety slash linebacker. Spot's perfect for Alontae Taylor. I think Taylor's going to be the star DB on this team. And your outside cornerbacks were primarily McKinstry and Yadam. Quincy Riley, the rookie, isn't able to participate in OTAs right now, but I believe he's going to be a primary backup outside guy. And we're going to see how everybody else fits in with this new defense. If there's a lot of mix and match, then I think Riley's going to fit right in. I think Taylor's going to fit in just fine. But there's a chance we'll get another cornerback. It's a strange. I look at this depth chart and I feel like we're missing something. And yeah, maybe that something is Asante Samuel Jr., which is a signing that we probably won't make until right before training camp. But we're going to keep our eyes open for that. And at safety, you've got Justin Reed and Tyrann Mathieu. I don't think Matthew was there for the OTAs. He may have been. I didn't hear a lot coming out of the reports as far as safety goes, except to say that Terrell Burgess was like with the second team. So I don't know if Howden's going to make it. I have a feeling Howden's going to fall out of favor with this coaching staff. You've got the rookie in Sanker, who I think has a place on this defense, and I really have hopes for Ugo Amadi to fit in really well with this defense. But a guy that does fit in well is Burgess. He played in this defense before, and so now that he's with the Saints with the same coaching staff, I think Burgess is going to be a guy that's going to make this team. And I have a feeling he's going to beat out Howden. We've also got a lot of really good special teamers on this team now, and so JT Gray's time as a safety with the Saints may be coming to an end. He's an older player now, and he's one of the best special teams players in the league. But we're going to need spots for actual safeties that can do what's being asked to do. So it'd be nice to hear some reporting about the safeties this week coming up because I have a lot of questions. I'm looking at Terrell Burgess making this team ahead of Howden and Gray. And I think when it's all said and done, your five safeties are going to be Matthew, Reed, Sanker, Burgess, and Amadi. But all that's up in the air right now, so we'll have to wait and see. All right, that was your defense. Special teams, you've got the kickers. You got Smith battling it out with Groupie. I think Smith took all the kicks on Thursday. He looked good. He's got a strong leg. No one kicks an extra point harder than Charlie Smith. But you have to make 40 to 50-yard field goals consistently if you want to be a kicker in the NFL. If you can kick a 70-yard kick, great. Who's going to go for a 70-yard kick? You want to give the other team the ball at the 30-yard line, 30 yards to go for a touchdown? The only time you're ever going to make a kick like that's at the end of the half or the end of the game. So, yeah, we got to see with Charlie Smith. We have to see consistency with Charlie Smith. I love that strong leg. I love it. Just make all of your kicks between the 30 yards and 50 yards, and maybe you can beat out Groupie. Groupie was really accurate last year. I think I think he's a reliable kicker. I think that if we let if we let him go, he'll find another job. I think there's probably 10 other teams that'll take Groupie. So I think Charlie Smith still has a little way to go. And as far as punter goes, we've got the undrafted punter coming in here, battling it out against our incumbent Hayball. Hayball was good at putting the ball inside the 20, but we were punting from the 50-yard line most of the time anyway. And we weren't downing anyone inside the 10. We kept downing them inside the 20, but not inside the 10. So I think Hayball's definitely not perfect. And our undrafted rookie punter has a real chance here of making this team. He was one of the best punters in college last year. He averaged about 45 yards a punt, but there were no returns. I think he only had 5 punt return yards total allowed in his last college year. That's because he's punting the ball high. They're having to call for fair catches. They're not able to return the punts. They're 45 yards, and that's kind of perfect. We kept punting from the 50 last year, and if you punt it 45 yards and down them inside the 10, that's perfect. So I think that's about it for special teams. That's your update from last week's OTAs. The reporting for this week should come out on Thursday. We're all going to consume that information this weekend. And I'll have another video for you next week breaking all that down. And subscribe, like the video, subscribe, it's free. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Who dat?